Well, hello, everybody. Here we are on a Wednesday night at another Essential Chat with Mitt. I want to thank you for joining us. I want you to participate early. My name is Mit Joyner. I am the president of NASW. I sit on the land of the Lenape here in Pennsylvania. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And for those, I am an African American woman with my hair swept up on one side. I'm wearing black rimmed glasses and I have a navy blue top on. So I hope that gives you a description of who I am, where I live, and what I do. I want to thank all of you all for joining us this evening. It's a hot topic, but I can't have you leave here tonight without committing how you are going to help get people to those polls. Now, the first thing that I want to do is to ask you to put your name in the chat, tell us where you're from, and I want you to ask us provocative questions about what social workers can do to assist with help getting and generating all of these votes that we need in every state across our nation. And I see some of my friends out there, Tony Alexander, Professor Wilkes, and I just a BSWC student from Johnson C. Smith. Thank you for joining us. That's what we want to hear. And so think about these questions and think about the fact that Tuesday is here and it's never too late to bring change. Now, I always start everything with a song. I love music. And my song this evening is A Ball of Confusion. So I'm going to read the lyrics to you because I could sing if I really had a voice, but I don't. So here we go. One, two, one, two, three. People moving out, people moving in. Why? Because of the color of their skin. Run, 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 but you sure can't hide. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Vote for me and I'll set you free. Rap on, brother. Rap on. Well, the only person talking about love thy brother is the social worker. And it seems nobody's interested in learning real truth but the teacher. Segregation, determination, demonstration, integration, aggravation, humiliation, obligation to our nation, ball of confusion. Yeah, that's what the world is today, a ball of confusion. You see, the sale of meds are at an all-time high. Young folks walking around with the power of the vote, but will they? The city's ablaze in the summertime, and the beat goes on. Evolution, revolution, gun control, reproductive rights, shooting rockets to the moon, kids growing up way too soon, politicians saying, let's taxes on everyone, but the 1% will solve everything. And the band played on. So round and around we go each election year. Where's the world headed? Nobody knows. Oh, social workers, can't you hear me talking to you? This is just a ball of confusion. And yeah, what is the world today? There's fear in the air, tension everywhere, unemployment rising high, brown and black, LGBTQAI losing their rights. Anti Semitic hate is at an all time high. And the only safe place to live is, and the band played on. Eve of destruction, voter rights violated, brown refugees denied, border controls, bill collectors, homelessness accepted, mental health out of hand, suicide, too many bills, guns are the law of the land. People all over the world are shouting, and all the wars. and yet the band plays on. Great Google Looga social workers, can't you hear me talking to you, saying ball of confusion? That's what this world is today. Our democracy is almost gone. Let me hear you. Let me tell you. Let me say it is a ball of confusion. That's what this world is today. Voter turnout can be our answer to stop this ball of confusion. And so that is what we're here to talk about today. Our ball of confusion. This day on Tuesday, that was always a day that was held high, where you go place your vote. And to the victors went control without all the hate and the loss of dignity. But the world is changing. Has our democracy already fallen? We will know very soon. So, we had on our show Alan Wheat, who works with NASW and helps us understand our polling. Unfortunately, Alan Wheat became ill yesterday and is not able to attend. The message that he wanted me to give you is that the polls don't matter. Over the last 2.5 years, polling has been bought by political dollars, and you can find a poll to support any position that you want. But what he did say was this election is all about the turnout. So if you see a poll where I live in Pennsylvania that says X candidate's got it, you still have to go vote, even if you're for that candidate, because the polls can be wrong. And if you feel that your candidate, oh, wow, they've already lost it, you still need to go and cast your vote because the polls can be controlled by someone where the truth is not there. You see, we do know these elections are controlled by a few hundred votes at times. That is why there is suppression of the vote. Now, I do have to let you know that when I came upon this dilemma that Alan Wheat couldn't be here, I didn't want to disappoint our audience. So I talked with my friend Marla, who's going to be on the show a little later, and I'll introduce you to her in a few minutes. And she came up with the perfect person to join us, Delaware State Senator Marie Pinkney. You see that lady right there? She is one of the youngest ones voted as a state senator in Delaware, African American, LGBTQAI. And you know what she is? She is a social worker. Yes, she heard that from her alma mater. If you want to do something, do it and change. And she did that. So you're going to hear from her soon. But first, I want to bring on screen my friend, Marla Blunt Carter. Marla Blunt Carter is an associate professor at the Rutgers University School of Social Work, where she teaches both foundation courses focused on policy and management. Professor Blunt Carter has been teaching at Rutgers since 2014, initially as an adjunct professor, and then becoming a full time faculty member in 2014. Now, listen to this. She was awarded by her students as the Outstanding Professor of the Year for 2017, 2018, and 2020. Now we could say, okay, Marla, what happened in 19? Well, that was because she was voted the most supportive and most innovative professor awards in 2019 and 21. So just like the Phillies are here in Pennsylvania, she hit 5 home runs in 5 years. Prior to teaching, Professor Blunt Carter's professional experience included positions in the public sector and community focused organizations. She served as the director of the constituent services for the then U.S. Senator Joe Biden, Delaware State Director for the 2008 Obama Biden presidential campaign, and Senior Advisor and Communications Director for Delaware's Insurance Commissioner, and the Director of Policy and Community planning for Delaware HIV Consortium. Marla remains active in political activities, and she serves as a political consultant and campaign advisor to candidates on the local, state, and federal campaigns. Now, I'll let her tell you a little bit more about um, what do we call it? LBR. What is it? LBR
You are.
down there that's getting ready to run, who is her sister. But this, she doesn't work with, Marla doesn't work with her sister as her sister. She works with her as a campaign consultant. Marla is also a committed wife and mother, and she's been married to Dr. Richard Carter for 31 years. And they have two beautiful, beautiful children. And my maiden name is Carter, so I sometimes tell her I'm related to her in other ways. Marla, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's always great to be with you. The day I met you, you became my soulmate. And I'm going to turn this over so you can introduce one of Delaware's finest.
Yes, thank you, Mitt. Thank you so much. And as always, it is just a pleasure and an honor to be with you. You are an inspiration, and NASW is just extremely fortunate to have you lead this unbelievable organization of social workers that could be and should be a powerful force. Um, like you said, I am Marla Blunt Carter, a professor here, and I am also the vice president of NASW board in Delaware. So I'm involved in NASW work every day. And one of the things that we were working on recently, where our paths crossed with Marie Pinkney, Senator Pinkney, was talking about licensing in Delaware. So we work together quite a bit. And yes, this topic of politics is more than just a topic for me. And it's also not just seasonal for me. This is something that I believe in my bones is important, that every social worker should be engaged and involved in political and social justice. It's not something that only macro social workers do. But the Code of Ethics says in section 6.04 that we should all be engaged in political and social action. I take that very seriously. The daughter of a politician, elected official, and social worker, my dad trained me up to understand that if you want to get things done, you need to go where the power is. And if possible, you need to be in control of that power. And Barbara Mikulski, state's US Senator, said that politics is social work with power. So we need to leverage our power and get the right people in office so that the people that need help are helped. And Senator Marie Pinkney is one of those people that we got in office. I am just beyond proud of her for a lot of reasons. Not only that she is a powerful young Black woman, but that she is committed to social work and everything that she does. And she's successful. She is extremely successful in the legislation that she has put forth and just the advocacy work that she's done. And so, Mitt, I am grateful that we have this platform to showcase, what social workers should be about. It's not just about getting out the vote. It's about us running for office as well. So I'm going to read Senator Pinkney's bio because I just felt it was necessary for people to know, like her story, that she became in 2020 the first African American LGBTQ person ever elected to Delaware State Senate, and that she is dedicated to fighting the negative impacts of racial and socioeconomic inequalities, as well as the stigmas and hurdles faced by formerly justice involved individuals and those limited with educational backgrounds. She currently serves as the chair of the Senate Corrections and Public Safety Committee, the vice chair of the Senate Housing Committee, and the Senate Agricultural Committee. She is a member of the Senate Health Committee and the Senate Environment and Energy Committee. Senator Pinkney also serves as on the Legislative Oversight and Sunset Committee. These issues are very important to her. But her day job, let me tell you, she's not just doing politics. She's also working at Christiana Care, which is our largest healthcare system in Delaware. And she works as a social worker and case manager there, where she's dedicated to advocating alongside families seeking quality healthcare, access to resources, educational support, and government policies that support them. She's a graduate of Norfolk State University with her bachelor's degree in social work, and from Delaware State University, Delaware's HBCU, with her master's degree in social work. And she is the proud mother of a 4-year-old German Shepherd named Gandhi and a 1-year-old cat, Penelope, aka Penny Proud. So, with that, I give the floor to the great Senator Marie Pinkney.
Thank you, Marla. Thank you so much. That was a beautiful intro, and I am most appreciative, especially that you mentioned my boy Gandhi, who is right here and will make an appearance on camera at some time. He does it every time I'm on his Zoom, so you will see him at some point. But excuse me, thank you for that beautiful and thoughtful introduction. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here with two extraordinary social workers this evening and for such an important conversation. Marla, you quoted the quote that politics is social work with power, and that might be my new favorite line because that's what it is. That is the reason that although I had never been involved in politics before, the reason that I knew that I could run for office and be successful because I'm a social worker and because I know if we're going to do one thing, it's that we're going to figure it out, we're going to solve the problem, and we're going to get to the solutions. And so I'm so excited to be here with you all and to talk more about the role that social workers play in politics and policy because it is a very, very important one.
Well, I thank you all for being here. We're going to ask people to post questions as we begin. But what I'm going to ask, the question that I'm going to ask each of you, what should social workers be doing from now until Tuesday? Senator Pinkney, you were involved and are involved in campaigns. You know, this is the time when you do what, right? What can we be doing rather than sitting home?
I think there's so much that we can be doing. I know it gets really easy to think that we're at this point, we're down to the wire and there's nothing left to do, but that is not true. One of the things that we find is that this is the most important time in an election because this is when people are paying attention. This is when it's in the forefront of their mind. A lot of campaigns have been going for months, but now is the time where people at those doors and on the other end of those phones are receptive and ready to talk because they know that voting is happening or that voting is coming up. So we as social workers can be talking to our families, our friends, our church family, our communities, our neighbors. We can be canvassing with candidates. We can be making phone calls, text messages with candidates. We can be spreading the word and connecting people to resources and making sure that people have a voting plan. A lot of people know that they need to vote on Tuesday, but how many people know that they can early vote? How many people know that they can absentee vote? How many people know how they're going to get to the polls on Tuesday? How many people know if they need a driver's license or their voter registration card or any type of ID? And so making sure that people have a voting plan and making sure that people are aware of who they're voting for and why they're voting, I think is the most crucial thing that we as social workers can do. And bringing more people out with us while we're doing it.
Marla, you often talk to me about this is the year that young people can have it all. What do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, I think people need to know that young people are more involved than they meaning the media would like for us to believe. 1 in 6 candidates running for Congress are millennials. So there are individuals that are motivated to run for office, and there are individuals that are just motivated to see change happen. And so I think that this is an important time for young people to get involved because the number between Generation Z and millennials of individuals that could vote outpace baby boomers. So they could actually be the ones that set policy. If they could just turn out in the numbers that they make up. then they could be the decision makers. So I think that it's important that people understand, you know, that you are in control of what happens. It's not someone else. And back to that voting plan, I think I don't want to skip past that because Senator Pinkney, you said something that's really crucial in this election and in this time. In the past, we didn't have to have a plan. You just had to go vote, right? But now we know that there are attacks on our democracy, and individuals are trying to suppress certain votes. So a voting plan means understanding and looking up, where is my polling place? Because of redistricting, you might not be voting in the same place that you voted before. So you got to look up to make sure that A, you're registered, B, you know where to vote. But that voting plan is not just for you, it's also for those in your network, in your, who else in my household needs to go vote? Because I need to make sure that they have a plan, right? And while I'm in line, if there is a line, what is my plan? Do I have someone that could stand proxy for me while I go to the bathroom? Does the law allow that in my state? There are certain states that have now banned uh, uh, that very action of having someone stand in for you, or even someone giving you water. So the voting plan has to do with that too, you know. But in your state, if at all possible, if there is some type of early voting, do that. Look into that tomorrow, because most early voting will end on Sunday. It will not be the day before. It'll be on Sunday.
Mhm.
And if many of us do early voting, guess what? Those lines are shorter because our votes are already in. So, voting, creating that voting plan is important. The other thing that's important, what you can do, because people say it all the time, but what can I do? There's a lot of things you can do, including sitting at home on Facebook. You could just share information about a voting plan. You could share this discussion that we're having tonight. You don't even have to come up with the right words, or you don't want to get into a political discussion. You're just trying to motivate people to be civically responsible. So just share information that's factual and useful, but can help to turn out the vote. That's just the easy part. The other things you can do is, yes, you can drive people to the polls. Yes, you can donate to a campaign. All of this stuff is very, very helpful. $5 goes a long way. So, those are just some quick things off the top of my head. But when I ran the Obama campaign in 2008, anybody that walked in my headquarters with an idea, I said yes. Somebody said they like to cook chili. I'm like, cook chili on Tuesday because she's making hoagies on Thursday. They fed the volunteers. Somebody came in and said, I'd love to set up a lemonade stand outside and donate the money to the campaign. Please do that. Whatever you want to contribute to help to make this electoral process easier, better, and more inclusive, do it, offer it. It'll help. But we definitely got to turn out that vote.
Yeah, Marla and Senator Pinkney, all of you know that we have thousands of students who do internships, right? And I always wondered how social work in itself could show up with their student groups in Armor, because we're not there trying to tell people to vote for one side or the other. We're just trying to make sure that your experience is there and that we get people there. So what advice would you give if you were a student back there on your campus now, and we got to boot you back to that time where you're just there, head of social work club? Knowing what you know now, how would you help students organize that campus to get out the vote, that community to get out the vote?
Marla, you want to go first, or
Well, now, since I just did all of that
yeah,
talking, I figured I'd give
you
you
gotta
more.
take a breather. I think that's
So,
that's a really important question, and it's a really good question because I think so often we forget about our students. Like they get left behind in these conversations. But again, to your point, Dr. Joyner, they are such an important constituency. and they have power. And I don't know why, but now as I'm thinking about this, it started taking me back to the thought of the civil rights era and civil rights movements, when students were some of the most powerful voices in those movements, and how we can utilize that voice and continue to uplift that student voice now. And I think it comes back to a lot of what we were just saying, right? Like, students have the ability to gather in ways and motivate one another in ways that I think is so incredibly powerful, but not used. And so our students can be they can hold candidate forums at their schools. Students can meet with candidates individually. Students can, if they don't want to meet with candidates, they can be, again, knocking doors. They can be the people at the polls if your state allows it. They can be the people at the polls, making sure that people have water, making sure that people have somebody to stand in the lines for them. They can be reminding people about early voting. They can make sure that people understand who's going to be on the ballot. So I think students play an integral role. And I think making sure that they feel empowered to do that is probably one of the most important parts of this conversation, because so often our young people are the ones left out of the conversation when they are powerful beyond measure, and they have the ability to be, or to not only be foot soldiers, but even to Marla's point about just how many people, shout out to the millennials, I'm a millennial, so like shout out to us, but like just how many young people are in Congress and in state houses is a reminder for our college students, like it's almost time to pass the baton to you all. And so there is absolutely no reason why you should not be engaged in this political process, and your voice in your constituency should not be heard.
Right.
Yeah, and we have a couple people. I was looking at the folks that were saying hello and hey, how you doing? And I saw Florida, I saw North Carolina, I saw Pennsylvania. Those three states in particular have heated Senate races that are happening right now. If you are a student in any of those states, and you may be registered at home, right? So you might have done an absentee ballot, but you want to be involved and engaged in politics in your state with your school. The best thing you can do is identify a candidate who is running and their platform aligns with our values. They don't believe that a woman's right to choose is between them, their doctor, and the local politicians, but that is a woman's right to choose. That's the candidate that you go and volunteer for. This Saturday, I know in almost every state, I know that they are canvassing and door knocking to get out the vote. And you need to find the candidate whose values align with our values. And you need to turn out that vote for them. It's just very simple as volunteering. That's all. There's nothing special. You don't have to do anything great. And the other thing that you could do, there's three things. One, volunteer for a candidate on the next 5 days. That's that. After this, it won't matter. Right now, it matters. That's number one. Number two, just wear a t-shirt or a button, or I call it non-combative activism, right? You just sporting it. You just letting other folks know. So then they will ask the question, oh, you support such and such. Why? Right? Just wear a button, wear a t-shirt to show your support. So, I mean, it doesn't take anything to do that. It really doesn't. But back to what I was saying about the social media piece. I'm 55 years old, and I know black don't crack. I don't look that old, but young folks are on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter. Do something. Share with your network. We need young people to turn out to vote. So yeah, knock on the door and get the old people out. But then put up stuff. Do a cuff it dance to that. You know what I mean? By saying it's important that you go vote. You need to model what you want to see other people do. And then you also need to educate them. And then you need to make them move to action. So
Marla, in the comments too, Sharon Wilkes is asking about if we as social workers should take the lead in creating voting plans, and I think that is a really important question to address, because yes, we should, and I think sometimes
it depends on the workplace, because what you don't want to do, a voting plan does not have to be partisan. So yes, helping people to know how to exercise their right to vote. I would not encourage you to do that without informing your superior, your supervisor, or whatever to let them know your intention. But that should be our charge. I would hope that nonprofits would understand that that is something that is not a threat to their 501c3 status, because that's what a lot of people say. But it is not the case if the activity is nonpartisan.
Nonpartisan.
Mhm. I mean, that's always where the League of Women Voters come in because it's such a nonpartisan group as well. Something that you reminded me, Senator Pinkney, was the Mississippi Summer Project, where every year people would be organized into buses to go down south and make sure that we register people to vote. And out of those groups, you had CORE, which was the Council on Racial Equality. You had the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. You had the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. You had all of these groups that back then in the day, in the 70s, were threatened, their lives were threatened.
Mhm.
Some went down south and did not return. And we know that. So today's environment, kind of looking at what Marla was saying with social media, is another way of having a social media summer project, or
Mhm.
where you do a TikTok and you educate, you ask people, how many people can we get in our circle to go vote? You do those kind of things that motivate people, because that's the CRT that is trying to be removed from the classroom. That type of information to kind of know what our past did. Understanding your history is you don't repeat your mistakes. And so I was so glad that you brought that up, because that was an era that I always taught about in my classes. And I asked people to look at who evolved out of those groups. Some of our biggest
Mhm.
leaders, that's where John Lewis, people tend to look at John Lewis at 55, 65. But he started this at 18 and
18
19.
years old with his
Right,
backpack.
with his backpack and his little trench coat. He
Mhm.
did what he needed to do, not because he wanted to be the John Lewis that we know of him today, but because he was fighting for equality, for that vote. And so let us go through this for a minute. Let's remind people what's on the ballot. And I know that Representative Towns talked about the fact that what's on the ballot is women's rights. What's on the ballot is the right for LGBTQIA people to be who they want to be, but also to marry, because there's no question that if the wrong set of people get in, we may see a reversal of that as well. What is on the ballot is your mother's and father's social security. And if that's removed, what is also on the ballot is you're going to need to pay for them, not only their social security, but their health care, because all of those things are on the ballot and all of them kind of relate to you. So as you're beginning to think about what's in it for me, oh, go vote. I hear all this blue versus red, control of the Senate, control of the House, yada, yada, yada. But let us look at some of the legislation that will be impacted that we know. Voting is on the ballot, whether or not we are going to allow one person, one vote. Voting could be done easy. Just think about this, how we pay our, when Uncle Sam comes at us every year, we just can e-sign our name, send it in. They accept the check, cash that check the next day they get it, and that's acceptable. But voting still requires a privilege of being able to have time to vote, unless we have in our states, and some states have early voting and different platforms. But even that is being, do we really want to do that? Let us look at where this country is. My dad made me be involved in voting because he was the block captain. So he had a long list of people that you had to call. And because I was his daughter, I was the one that made the call. But it was very interesting to me about how people today really don't understand the civics, the fact that uh, the school board people are going, they're going to make a difference. State elections such as yours, Senator Pinkney, state people are going to be in control of some things. They're going to make a difference. So would you help me remind our viewers, and from our viewers, I want to start taking your questions. So begin to put them across the screen, and when we're going to take your questions. Here's one from Professor Wilkes. So, how do you get more young people engaged in the political process and to help them understand that their voices matter? Well, I wish we had time to go back and watch Eye of the Prize, because you would see from Eye of the Prize how their voices mattered. Wish we could again tell the story of Emmett Till. I wish we could talk about how Bull Connor would put hoses on people and those people would stand there and vote. I wish we could go to the lunch counters in Atlanta where people were spit on because they wanted their rights. But we're almost back there in America, people, and don't get it twisted. We are almost back to where it was in the 60s. Now, that's my answer. I'm going to allow you all to answer as well.
You know, I think it's an amazing question, and I honestly, Dr. Joyner, I think that you just answered it, and it is by making sure that we understand our history and why it is so important. But I also think there is a piece where we just need to ingrain civics again into early childhood and in our entire lives. I think it becomes so easy to be disconnected in what civics actually is and how it impacts your day-to-day life, right? So we can talk about these issues on a macro level, but until people understand how they hit home, until kids understand that there is more than a president and that not just a president is important, until people understand that the president is not the one that passes laws, until people understand the difference between state policy and federal level policy, I don't think that kids can make that connection and young people can make that connection to just how important politics is. And so I think we miss the mark when we're not making sure that kids as young as 5, 6, 7 in early elementary school have a connection and feel connected to politics and what that actually means for them. And so I would really love one thing I really think for our younger kids is if we in all of the community centers that we have or give our kids access to and the programming that we create for our kids. And I'm talking kids and then all the way up through middle school and high school. We just need to meet people where they are and we need to ingrain politics and how it impacts your life and people's every day. And so I'm thinking so much like as you started going through the issues, I'm like, what else? Also, another thing that's on the ballot is gun violence, right?
Yeah.
Like we
Yes.
lost Takeoff yesterday. We lost one of the Migos yesterday. And there's a 17-year-old in my life who is upset about that. Right. And so how do we make sure that she has the connection to the fact that gun violence is a political issue? Gun violence is a policy issue. And if you are angry about the loss of this 28-year-old man, find a politician who is talking about gun violence and see what they're saying. Are they saying that we need to get the guns off the street, or are they saying 2A and don't worry, don't touch it at all, right? And so if we're making a connection to the things that are hurting you, the things that are hitting you in the heart, and how that connects to policy, I think that's how we get young people engaged, is making sure that, number one, we understand that history so people know what you're talking about when you're talking about people getting spit on at counters, so people know what you're talking about when we're telling people that before they got spit on at those counters, they were in somebody's house getting prepared to be spit on at counters, right? And so making sure that we understand this history of why we fought so hard to get here, and then what that history in present day means for your everyday life once you do go cast that vote for somebody, and how you then hold them accountable after you've cast your vote for them. Because it's not enough to just vote on Tuesday. Somebody asked the question, and I did lose it, but somebody asked the question, about what do we do after and how do we make that connection for people after. And that connection is once you get them in office, find them down in Leg Hall. What are they doing down in Leg Hall? How are they voting? How are you holding them accountable for their votes? Are they responding to you when you're trying to hold them accountable? And again, coming back to making that a part of people's everyday lives and the simplicity of it, I think is the answer to that question.
Yeah. To piggyback on what Senator Pinkney said about making the issues matter. um, and that connection between voting and solving problems. Right now, we don't see that politics solves the problems. And so, if we can bridge that gap where they actually see that it could, if we had the right individuals in office, which is why I started this by saying that 1 in 6 candidates running are millennials. That's how can we get young folks engaged and keep them engaged? We get different people in office. That's number one. We get younger people with ideas that are more inclusive, and they have an ability to communicate to younger people in a way that they speak to what is important to them. So that's number one for me. And that is that representation matters, not just in race, ethnicity, but also in age.
Mhm.
If you see someone out there that's doing something and speaking to you and to your issues, well then yeah, you're gonna want to be involved because it's you. They're speaking to you and things that matter to you. You know, right now the issues, they don't seem to really speak to young people. They don't see it as being theirs. And that's a big part of it. Somebody put up there about teaching social workers about politics, and that maybe we could help to convert the interests and issues into politics. But it seems hard to move the dial on the issues unless we engage in the electoral process. Absolutely, it's
Mhm.
impossible to move to move it unless we are engaged. And so, Denise, what I've decided to do, and with the blessing of my dean at my school, I'm creating a political social work course, a 15-week course, because I want social workers to understand I am tired of just coming up with band-aids to these problems. No more programs are needed. I want to solve this with a policy. I'm
Mhm.
tired of programs. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, we do need to learn the importance of us being on the political arena, us in it, working in those spaces, and also supporting organizations like NASW. There are over 700,000 social workers in this country. We are a force, and we don't even leverage our power in the way that we could. So, yeah, I think that the best way, in addition to making the issues matter and having representation in office, the last thing is to make it easier. Voting should
Mhm.
not be this difficult, y'all.
Right?
It shouldn't. And so if we get the right people in office and they streamline this process so that everybody is, granted the same opportunity to vote,
Yeah,
then
you, Senator Pinkney, we're going to get to Anthony McLean's question.
Mhm.
But before we say that, Marla, you brought up about NASW, and I do want to remind everybody that NASW has a political action committee, and that there are over 110 social workers that we endorse, not social workers, candidates that we endorsed. I urge you to go to our website, look it up. All of them follow the principles of the code of ethics. We do not pick candidates because they're Republican or Democrat. We pick candidates because they uphold the code of ethics. And the one question I saw up there from Tony Alexander prior to that was, how do we sustain social work? See, I think social work did itself some damage a few years ago when we started having this war amongst ourselves about micro, meso, and macro. And if you're in macro, you think about these things. But if you're in meso, I'm just really kind of talking about my family or my other organizations that are like me. And if I'm micro, I only worry about my client. See, I believe all of that is hogwash, because really what social work is micro, meso, and macro all tied up into one. No matter what job you have, be it at the macro level, it's still going to impact that individual. And whether you're at the micro level, you still have an obligation to let the macro level know it's not happening the way you all thought. That program that you have is not happening. And those of us that are in agencies, that have preposterous or outdated policies, we have to bring about change. And I want to link that one thing to what Senator Pinkney said about civics. See, I always started with civics being homeroom rep. First grade, second grade, who's the homeroom rep, because you learned about representation, about elections, the whole bit. And for whatever reason, in our schools and in everything that we do, that's being blown up. That we're only going to be looking at all of these issues around hate. Whether the insurrection took place, whether Pelosi's husband had a hoax, all of these things. Is that the type of person that you want helping you in your community? When you say a 15-year-old child got shot, do you want a politician who is going to say, hey, it's only a hoax? Or do you want a politician to realize there's too many guns in the street? You don't need Uzis. We need to get them off the street. How do we do those kind of things? How do we have programs like lock in basketball and other programs that's going to keep the kids off the street? What can we do? And so that is everything that you're dealing with when you vote. Is because people like Senator Pinkney can go down in Delaware, Bear, Delaware, or in Wilmington, Delaware, and create ideas and take that to the legislation to say, let's get this funded. So it's more about not just voting on Tuesday, it's making sure that Senator Pinkney, and if you go back and you look at her website, for you just being there, and this gets right into the question that's there about how did you get into this journey, and my God, you've been working your tail off, and you have a full-time job. Let's not get it twisted. You're not sitting at your legislative office 7 days a week. You're at Christiana Care holding somebody's hand, telling them about the health care they need. But then in the evenings and the afternoons and all your other time, how can I help Delaware? So let's kind of get to this question that's up here by Anthony McLean. And I wonder if that's Angelo or Anthony, but we'll go with it.
Thank you for that question. And it's interesting, Dr. Joyner, as I was listening to the everything that you just said, and Marla, everything that you just said, a lot of it was is the answer to that question. Like, my journey to the Senate was being a social worker. I'm one of the things that I'm most proud of today is that I can honestly say that I had no interest in politics. I was not looking to be in politics at all. I was looking to be a social worker. I loved my job. I was good at my job. I'm still good at my job. I'm not there full time. I think I would be crazy if I was there full time and doing the legislature. I'm not there full time. I'm there part time. But I was there full time. And Christiana Care was an eye opener for me. And I owe that organization so much for the way that it grew me as a social worker. And I think one of the most important parts of my journey was the 3 years that I spent in the surgical ICU at Christiana Care, the trauma unit. And so, a lot of what I was dealing with as a social worker, just it frustrated me so badly, right? And the number one thing was young Black boys coming into that ICU and being shot. There is only so much of that I could take before it took this job from being something that I loved to being something that was dreadful some days, because the ICU is intense. It's such an intense place to work. You see so much, and when you continuously see young Black boys that could be your cousin, your friend, your brother, your father, uncle, like over and over again, it gets disheartening. And so between that and then working with patients who didn't have insurance, working with patients who didn't have a documented immigration status, meaning that they had no access to anything once they left the hospital, all of these things over and over again, and being what I felt like in a position to not be able to do more than just put a band-aid on what was a larger systemic issue for me, because I can help every single one of those patients, and I will do whatever I have to help every single one of those patients, but ultimately another one is going to walk through the door. And so it got to a point where I felt like I was not being effective in the way that I knew that I could be effective, because case managers are vital, right? Like, doctors and nurses get a lot of credit, and they should, but we are the silent soldiers in the hospital, because without us, the hospital system is backed up. Patients don't have any place to go. Doctors don't know the first thing about helping with social and emotional problems. And so we really are silent soldiers, and we don't get the recognition. But I knew that I needed a change in a way that would allow me to stop people from coming into the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe in feeling fulfilled in the careers that we choose for ourselves, because that's how we are making sure that we're helping people. And when I got to a point where it just felt like this was a band-aid of a solution, I knew that I needed to do something more. And I knew that I was a social worker, and I could figure out what that more was. And Marla, this might be a story you can tell Lisa. I was on social media one day, and she was promoting a class for candidates, for people who wanted to become candidates. And she had offered to, I don't know the process, but she had actually offered to cover the cost of the class for someone. I missed the deadline for that by the time I saw it, but it didn't matter. I was introduced to the fact that the class was out there. So like a social worker, I went to that class. They showed you how to run a campaign. Like a social worker, I said, oh, so you're telling me if I do A plus B, I'm going to get C? No problem. I can do that. Never been involved in politics a day in my life. But like, I'm a social worker, and I knew that I could figure it out. You are telling me that there's a logical way to do this. And if I get to the other end of this, I will be able to help these patients stop coming into the hospital. And so I'm always transparent in the fact that I stumbled my way here. I did, but I knew that the universe that I believe in, the higher power that I believe in, wanted me to be doing it in this way, wanted me to be helping patients in this way. And so the overarching story of my journey is that I'm a social worker, and I wanted to be able to help people like we all do when we go into social work. And this to me felt like the best way to do it. And I think the end of that question was, what should we learn? What should people learn from that journey? Is to find the best way to achieve your goal of helping people. And it doesn't always have to be running for office. I was so green. I did not realize that there were a lot of easier ways that I could have done it besides running for office, because running for office isn't easy. And if it's for you, go for it. But if it's not, the overarching, I think, thing to take away is to, if you want to help people, there are a million and one ways to do it. Find the way that works best for you, and find the way that is going to allow you to make a difference that it's going to feel meaningful to you, but more importantly, it's going to impact the people that you really want to impact.
Wow, that's a book in itself right there, because you didn't oftentimes you hear social workers say, I'm burnt out. I
Yeah.
can't do anymore. But you took that burnt out and turned it up as to what can I do, and that is very, very powerful, because everyone gets like, I can't do it, I can't do this anymore. But you're kind of like Marla as well, is you think of, okay, if I can't do this, what can I do?
Mhm.
And that is a story within itself, to give social workers an understanding. I always told social workers, you need to look at your job and kind of figure out what is your next step.
Mhm.
Staff development, Kadushin's book, right? We kind of always need to have social work and staff development. What is my next step? Don't marry your job,
Right.
right? But how do you bring about change? And that in itself is a story. Marla, do you have anything to add to it till we get to
What,
Karina's?
yeah, it was funny because I read Karina's remark as well as so many other remarks that I just want to answer, just all of them. But I wanted to just say to everyone that's on here that Senator Pinkney is being humble, and that she has just in 2 years she has made such an impact. Um, she's receiving awards for the work that she's doing, and I think that it's more than just getting people elected to office that align with our values, but it's continuing to support them. Marie knows, if she calls me and she needs something, I'm going to be there. But I also know if there's something that I'm passionate about, that I think is going to help our profession, both of our profession, she's going to be there. And so
Mhm.
I think, in addition to getting people in office, we have to support people that are working on our behalf, and support them in many ways. But a lot of it is just sending. We always send the complaint letter, but we never send the thank you. And I am willing to be, to testify on that issue if you need someone to speak on that matter, or if you would like some advice or expertise in a certain area based on my professional experience. I can bring this to you. So I think we need to be thinking about ways that we can support the elected officials that are doing the right work. I think that
Mhm.
that is important. um, As far as Karina's answer is concerned about what is the best, way to get somebody to vote after they said no over and over again, I just had this conversation this morning. We are now in GOTV. We are not in the persuasion phase. We don't have enough bandwidth to try to convince folks that are already firmly in the you don't have time. If this person is not going to come out, that time that you're spending, you could be already taking 3 or 4 people that were kind of on the fence. If this person is firmly no, put that energy elsewhere and work on her for 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that's
Can I
just what we do for volunteers when they knock on doors. So
And I just want to add one thing to that, Marla, because I think you're absolutely right when it comes to this election, like you said. But and going back to the idea of working on them in 2024,
mhm,
that is then where you get them engaged down in Leg Hall. And I think, obviously I'm biased, but I think state level politics is the most important level of politics. And it's
mhm,
where you get to see the fruit of your labor. Right. Because if you're just working on a federal level, sometimes you don't see change in a federal level for a really long time. And so it feels like nothing is happening. But if you're working with your state level legislator or even city level legislator and you're holding them accountable, I have constituents that I work with, like I appreciate the flowers, y'all. I really, really appreciate it. But nothing that I have done is done alone. A lot of the issues that come to me is something that somebody else wanted to see done. And I work with them all the way along the process. And so if that person didn't want to vote because they didn't believe anything was going to get done, let them see the process, because it's not enough for us to just be working at election time. If you let them see something, follow one bill that they care about and follow it from beginning to end and let them see it get passed, encourage them to testify on a bill, they will then feel like, oh,
mhm.
it's not just about voting. Something that this person actually does something. This person can actually get something done. And then in 2024, you're not even going to have to persuade them to vote because they're going to know that if the right person is down there, something will get done.
Right. And you'll have time to answer those questions,
Right.
because
Mhm.
a lot of times when individuals say, well, they don't do anything, I say, well, let's be specific. What is it that you want done? But that means you have to do your homework. You have
Exactly.
to understand what the Inflation Reduction Act was really about. You have to
Mm-hmm.
understand, what the rescue plan really did. You have to, in order to combat that ignorance with facts, with information. So, sometimes individuals that say that they're not doing anything, well, they're not doing anything that they know.
Mm-hmm.
So we can use that as an opportunity to educate. But with 5 days left, that energy is better spent in turning out the vote.
Right. You don't want to be sitting in a room with a group of people saying they're not going to vote. My favorite answer is, what are you afraid of? Because if you do your homework, I like it relates to this question here. We do know the drama of these ads, the drama that's created on all of these different programs about who and snippets of this, because most of what people hear about their candidate or a candidate is a snippet, where we
Mhm.
know through social media that all of that, you can take my voice right now and change it to say something completely different.
Right.
That's the world we're living in. Someone said long ago, we'll regret the time that we have computers, and there are times when I regret the instant information. I still am the old school method. Look up the record of the candidate. What did they vote for before, right? If all of a sudden they are for reproductive rights, but I can look up and see that everything that they voted on prior to
Right.
making that beautiful campaign ad, because that's the issue right now, that they were not for women's rights, then they're not going to earn my vote that way,
Mhm.
because I'm not going to let the television become, or social media, or two words, or when someone, we're seeing a lot of ads right now about one of our senators who had a problem, and little snippets of that. I'm not going to let that dictate the record that the person had prior to that, right? So we have to remember that Wikipedia is a made up story, and right now we have socialpedia. It's all over the place, and it's going to get worse. We know that Twitter was just sold. It's going to get worse, people. And if that's the only way that you receive your information, you are not going to have information about your candidate. What you do is you look up at, like what I did when I saw that Senator Pinkney, when I went and I Googled her name and I looked at all of the areas that she was involved in this new women's caucus that you're
Mhm.
bringing back. And we didn't mention that, but I'm like, oh my God, she's bringing back the women's caucus. With the women's caucus, obviously, that's going to be talking about women's rights and the right to control our body. She's going to get my vote because I can see in black and white that that's what she is doing. And I think that that's so important for us and educators. It's important for educators to help people go back and learn how to look up the records of those that are in office and
Yeah.
everything that they've done. Um, so yeah, we do know that right now, these next 5 days, I'm turning my television and my phone off because it's all about hate. That's where America goes. I don't understand how it got here. If you notice, if I hear a candidate talking about the other candidate, but not what they're going to do, I don't need you to tell me how bad Marla is. I need you to tell me what's Mit Joyner going to do and when am I going to do it. If I can hear you say that, wow, a break-in at someone's house is awful, no one's who get takes their life for political office, no one's house should be violated that way. And if you can't say that, then you're not going to get my vote. If you can't stand up and say that was wrong, that shouldn't happen to anyone, because I know that that's not the type of person that I want to run government. Those three branches of government. Remember that in civics: executive, judicial, and legislative. All of them shouldn't be able to be compromised just based on an ideology of this is how we're going to take control of the Senate. Just don't think it should happen. Maybe
So,
that's go
I
ahead.
was
Go
gonna
ahead, Marla.
Well, I wanted to answer before we jump to Denise's question. I just wanted to answer this question as well because people ask me all the time, like, how do you stay so positive and so upbeat and
Mhm.
so on fire? Don't you ever tire of the negativity and just the hate speech and all of that that's out there? And for me, I'm not going to turn off my TV. I'm going because it energizes me and it reminds me that I have got to do everything in my power to combat that negative energy. And that if I meet it with more negative energy, that doesn't change things,
Mhm.
right? So I personally think that it is our fuel to know what our purpose is,
Mhm.
right? We were put here as social workers to add to the betterment of society. And so that reminder of that energy is out there. It's necessary for us to realize our purpose, like to
Mhm.
get to work, to
Mhm.
not give up. It's the thing that makes me reach up and tie a new knot. So it does not penetrate my purpose, is what I'm saying.
Excellent point, Marla. That we all, as social workers, know we came into a problem field, right?
Right.
So that's what we got to involve ourselves in. Now, what was this question that Denise Rathman had? How do we convert interest in issues to interest in politics? Because it seems to me it's super hard to move the dial on issues unless we engage in electoral politics.
How do we convert interest in issues to
Hmm.
interest in politics?
I,
Well,
I think it's kind of what we've been talking about, right? Like the reminder that every political stance or every vote cast down in like Har in DC is an interest. So when people are talking about guns, it's the kid up the street who got shot, or the mother of that kid, or the school, right? When people are talking about infrastructure dollars,
mhm,
Dr. Joyner, I love Pennsylvania, and but sometimes driving through them streets, I've been wondering, is my car okay?
Hmm.
Same thing down here, right? But like, how are those infrastructure dollars getting used, and what's that mean for the streets that we ride down every day?
Hmm.
And I think that's how we do it, is making sure that there is a connection, and I think there is an onus on us as as people in politics and as people working on campaigns to make sure that people understand that. Because Marla, like you talked about the Inflation Reduction Act, but do people know what that means? And
Mhm.
you said that. Like, how do we make these really big important things digestible for
Mhm.
people? And I think it's in doing it and talking about these issues in a way that is again relatable to people's everyday lives.
Yeah.
Right. Because people don't realize about insulin, Marla. I mean, now how that has a cap, we'll have a
Yeah.
cap on it for people over 65, would have if it had passed, right,
Right.
be available for everyone.
Right.
How senior
Dr. Joyner,
citizens,
before you talk about something else, can I give you a plug right there?
sure,
This will be a shameless plug. But
sure.
in that didn't pass on a federal level, but I introduced and passed that legislation in Delaware.
Hmm.
So insulin for people who have state insurance or state controlled insurance, diabetic supplies will be capped at $35. And we did the insulin caps. Representative Bentz did the insulin cap
Mm-hmm.
3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Hmm.
again, with coming back to the question of interest to political issues, we all know somebody on diabetes
Right,
with diabetes,
right. And you
and
saw
that is
people in
important.
ICU on that, right? Couldn't pay for their insulin, so they didn't
I
have
saw,
it.
and
Right.
they didn't
There's the
have it, and they were
connection. Yeah.
getting their feet amputated because of it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I applaud you for that, and I applaud you for bringing that up because we don't know all of the positive things that have occurred over the last 2 years. There's been a heck of a lot of positive things that have occurred over the last 2 years,
Yeah.
and I just don't think we list them out and people understand and connect. But there it is. If you live in the state of Delaware, you're working in the state of Delaware as a social worker for DF, your the Department of Children and Youth, and you have diabetes, you have a cap.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so critical to you, to your income, to your family, and to your health. And
Mm-hmm.
and so those are the things, those are the connections, the issues to politics,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the politics are related back to those issues. And
And if
Right.
that
you
is
don't
really
live in the
important.
state of Delaware, take that issue to your state's representative or
Exactly.
your state senator and get it passed in your state.
Mhm.
Because let me tell you something. That was one of the easiest bills that I worked on. It voted in unanimous in both chambers. So
Right.
take it to your state legislature, and y'all can get it passed in y'all states too.
Yeah, and that's another big point that
Mhm.
I think people miss is that all politics is local.
All
That
Right.
politics is local.
yeah, like you just gave a perfect example. They don't even have to write the bill in another state. You have a bill. Just take it and say, let's do this here, right?
Mhm.
So, and a lot of what we're doing, our protections, our freedoms, it's on the local level. And that
Mhm.
and that's where we could be the most impactful. School board elections, city
Mhm.
council, places like that. It's not the high fame locations of elected office that really create the difference in our daily lives. I
I'm
think
glad you pointed that out because there's a prime example, in politics or local, and you showed how, okay, in Delaware, we're going to do things different, right? We're not going to wait on the feds. We're going to do something different, and that's going to impact families, and they are going to have access to medicine, right? Let us. Do we have some other questions there in the QE that we want to put up? Because I know when we always get started, the time keeps running out, and I want to make sure that we answer questions that
I
people
know that
have.
Denise Rathman jumped off, but to jump onto a voter protection
Hmm.
training. And somebody asked a question earlier in the chat about what to do to help people who have like voting discrepancies or problems at the polling places. If you're not trained in voter protection, do not insert yourself, but instead reach out to ACLU or the League of Women Voters or the local parties, the state party, because they have lawyers, they have individuals that are trained specifically for these problems. What I tell people, if none of that kind of support is available, and you run into problems, and someone tries to tell you that you cannot vote, you have the right to request a provisional ballot. Do not leave that place without voting. You can get a provisional ballot, and that stays. They won't count it until it is validated or verified. But at least you will not walk away as being a voter that was not able to exercise your right to vote. So, that's one thing that I just want to make sure. And then the second thing, like we said, ID is not required in some places, but bring it anyway.
Mhm.
Don't give people a reason to turn you away, right? So that I just wanted to go back to say that, because Denise had hit on some really good points about voter protection and about the PACE committee. And then that's the other thing too. There are ways that social workers, if you're on this Facebook live, then you are engaged already with NASW. So PACE committees that help to endorse candidates and are involved in the political process through NASW. They need people in the affiliate offices to volunteer. We need officers to volunteer to serve on the board.
Mhm.
So what we're doing as a chapter, people are like, well, what is NASW doing on the local level? We need members to be active and engaged before we can actually go out and do real organizing. And that once again is our responsibility. That's something that you can do. Just
Right.
have to
When
join
you
with.
yeah, when you enter the social work profession, you have to remember your professional association.
Yeah.
When we go down to Delaware to be able to say, we have a chapter in Delaware and this is what the social workers want, people are going to take notice to that. When we go to Washington, D.C., and we hit the Senate, be able to say, we have 55 chapters, one in your state, one in everyone's state, they take notice. But our numbers could be higher. And
Mhm.
so it is important for social work to be outward looking. I think sometimes we're so inward looking. What does it do for me lately?
Right.
Well, what we have to kind of think about is what can we do to uplift society in a block. If we
In a
had
block.
750,000 social workers across the United States that work not only in the for-profit but the non-profit in every sector in America, if you live long enough, you will access a social worker. There is no question about it. And
That's right.
so, with that power and with that girth, when I go to the Hill, I always do my research again, going back and looking at it, and I will see, oh, wow, this senator has a grandchild who is autistic. And
Mhm.
I will go in and talk about how social workers work with autistic children and what we do, because translating that makes it more personal, where they take notice of what we do.
Well, that goes back to what I usually, when I give a presentation on how to work with legislators and Senator
Mhm.
Pinkney, you tell me if this is true, but I tell people you got to have, it's the four knows. You have to know the member, right? Know the staff, know the issues, right? And know your ask.
Mhm.
Don't
Mhm.
come in there just talking about stuff very broad. Don't come in there, you don't know anything about the member. You don't know that they have two kids in private school, or that they've been working on this issue for 10 years. Or if you don't know the staff, those are the ones that make things happen. They put it in front of the member. They're the ones that have already read the brief before the member looks at it, right? And so, just understanding that your ask needs to be very clear, and you have to be a subject matter expert on the issue that you want them to address. If you have those four no's, then you can be impactful in 15 minutes.
Right.
You can
15,
be
and that's
anything
really
that
all
the
you're going to
member.
get. You're going to get
Right.
15 minutes. And I'm saying all of this. I don't know if we gave my whole bio, but I worked in Senator Biden's office, and I am the senior advisor to Delaware's history making first Black female congressional woman, who happens to be my big sister. But I know how to get things done in these elective offices, how to
Right.
navigate to
And
make.
that brings me to the point of, we might not get to talk to your uh, uh, that brings me to the point. I don't know if I froze there for a minute,
A
but
little
that brings me to the point of the staffers are critical. So don't go in and say, "Oh, I'm only talking to a staffer." My God, that person is so critical. And so be
bit.
prepared to tell your story. Maybe you may want to get to your sister, but maybe she had to be pulled to go to a vote. But that staffer is the one. And
Stafford is the
so,
one.
yes. I know anytime I go to offices in down there, I'd always bring myself a Hershey bar. just something to remind people. I'm from Pennsylvania, y'all.
Yes.
You know, you have time to talk to me.
Yes.
So it's always that. But what that is, and as we begin to wrap up, and we put this in tips, one of the tips is always being prepared, and
Yes.
that's what social work talks to us about. Sometimes being overly prepared, where you have more stuff and you know you're not going to use it all, but you have it all there for
Mhm.
whenever you need that. Being not prepared, having no plan for Tuesday, because you could wake up and all of a sudden there's a storm outside, or your car doesn't work, or
Right.
there's just something that pops up that's like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to vote
Right.
between those hours. So having that
Yes.
plan to,
Yes.
if you are going to vote, do it early.
Yes.
Don't say I'm going to go after dinner, or I'm going to go here. Get up, polls open at 7 o'clock. Get up, get it done, check it off your list.
Mhm.
And then begin to make some calls to other people that you know. If you're in a classroom, to be able
Mhm.
to say, I used to say to my students, I don't care who you vote for, but if you bring me back that little ticket,
Mhm.
when you're failing something, that little ticket might be able to help you out. So, what are those things that you could do that motivates others to get to the polls? Let's just get
Mhm.
these tips. And as we're getting these tips,
Yes.
this is your commitment, because I don't do any of these chats without asking for a commitment. Because the thing is, we can sit, listen, and learn, and do nothing.
Right.
That is not what social workers do.
Not.
Social workers take action. That's what makes us different. So let's get this list going. So you
So
heard some of mine.
yeah, I had a list of 5 things starting with tomorrow. So you'll every day you can do one of these things. And you said the first two, the first one being create a plan. That's day 5. Like it doesn't have to be detailed, but you need to have a plan. You need to know that you're registered to vote. You need to know where your polling place is. You need to know how you're going to get there. You need to know what do you need in the event that there's a line. What is your plan? What is the contingency plan if I leave the line? You have to plan. That's 5. Number 4 is to vote early, like you said. Not only voting early, if they have early vote, go do it. You don't need anything but your ID. And like you said, if there's not early voting, vote early in the day. Machines break, something happens in your life. Get it done and then get on with your day. Then you go the third day, 3 days from election day. Volunteer. It's going to be Saturday. Saturday, candidates are going to need help. I don't know what kind of help, but you find a candidate that you believe in and you go support them on that Saturday. Sunday, post a reminder for people to go vote. Election day is in 2 days. Do it on Sunday and do it after church or before the football game, like right when people aren't, too busy, but they're kind of chilling, a little scrolling on their little Insta or whatever. Something. Do a picture, do a TikTok, vote, tell people to vote. And then the last day, number 1, is you make sure that others are voting. You go around your whole network of people and you make it happen. So that's what I had. Um, that's my list. But I wanted to answer something that Tanya Curry said in the chat about what if you don't like either candidate? Then you vote for the one you like the best out of the worst. Because guess what? One of them's getting in. So the one that you like the least, you're giving them a vote if you don't go vote. Does that make sense what I'm saying? You have 2
Yeah,
people
yeah,
and
yeah.
one of them, you're not really feeling them, but the other one you hate. If you don't vote for the one that you're not really feeling, the one you hate just got your vote.
All right. And I would say look up their voting record. What have they proven that they have done?
Well,
Uh,
but she said that she doesn't like them all. She don't like either
right.
one of them.
Because sometimes you don't have to like a person,
Right.
but you have to
It's
really kind of understand the impact that that
yeah.
person will have over you. Because one of them is
Who's
going to
gonna
get
do the
in.
least harm?
Right.
Who's
Who's gonna
the
do the
least
least
harm?
harm?
That's
And
right.
then you run for office a couple years later and replace them.
There you go.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I think the both of you gave amazing tips, and I would just add 2 little inserts to it because y'all covered it. is a lot of states will also allow you to check the status of your ballot once you've submitted.
Yes.
If you voted earlier, if you did mail-in or absentee voting, check the status of that ballot once you submit it. And then also, when you're creating that voting plan, if you're thinking about how you're going to get back and forth, Lyft is offering 50% off of transportation on election day. So remind people that they have that access to transportation as well. And then give people transportation. Once you've cast your vote, give other people transportation. But there was one question. I think her name was Carissa Camille, was asking about how you handle the frustration of this stereotype that people of color don't vote. But I am very, one thing about me, y'all, I am very protective of Black people and people of color. And so I really did want to answer this because we get all kind of rumors thrown at us. We get all types of stereotypes thrown at us. There are people in every group of people who do not vote. Our vote is crucial. Our vote is critical. Our vote moves mountains and changes outcomes. And so that is why we get flooded so much with the idea that we don't vote. Yes, there are Black people who don't vote, but there are people in every group of people who don't vote. And so what I would say if you're tired of combating that, remind people about Fannie Lou Hamer. Remind people about John Lewis. Remind people about SNCC and CORE. Remind people about
Whitney
the
Young, Whitney Young,
SCLC, Whitney Young,
NASW President, Voting Rights Act,
like
right?
SCLC, right?
Right.
Remind people that we have been doing this. We aren't new to this. We are true to this. Marla and all of the campaigns that she has worked on and run are proof that that is not just our history. We're still doing this now, right? And so remind people that instead of trying to point out the group of people within our group of people who don't vote, that there are plenty of us who do vote. There are plenty of us in office and running for office at every level. And so the idea that we as a group or a monolith of people don't vote is a word that I probably should not say as an elected official on a Zoom that's probably recorded. Okay. We vote, and there are groups of people in every constituency who don't vote. So leave Black people alone, not too much on Black people in that way. Okay.
Right. And
Yeah.
I would honestly say, remind people of Georgia.
Remind people of Georgia,
Of
Dr.
Georgia, who
Joyner.
did it twice, and that is a state where African Americans came out twice, and without them, things may have changed really, really differently. So remind people of the last election. And the other
Remind people of
point
Georgia.
is look at the stats of who didn't vote. And again, look it up because sometimes people will have you thinking that we didn't do, but we came out. We came out. We were there.
Oh
Yes, there were some that didn't, but we came out. But there are other groups that did not. So
We are the reason that Biden is the president. Black people,
exactly.
Black women are the reason
Right,
that Joe
right,
Biden is the
right.
president.
yeah.
So remind people of that. But one thing that you said that made me think a minute, in Pennsylvania, if you pick up our paper, they are holding about 85,000 votes that they have decided to set aside because something was wrong. Either the person didn't date it right or didn't sign it right or didn't do something. And these are people who voted early in Pennsylvania, went and got a ballot because they said they were either sick or were not going to be at the in Pennsylvania at that time. So we have 85,000 votes that are set aside. The state Supreme Court had a tie. 3 voted to count them. 3 voted not to count them. The tiebreaker, that Supreme Court justice, has died. So they're going to have to resolve that later. And there's no question that people will say that if a Mastriana got in, he'll make the decision. But if a Shapiro gets in, they're going to try to, because the legislator. But if you check your ballot, what you just said, Senator Pinkney, and you realize that your vote has not been registered, try to do something about that because Pennsylvania is trying to gerrymander all through the Philadelphia, Chester, Pittsburgh area. That Carter that they have, they're not going to do it there. So I like the fact, see if you voted, see if your vote has been counted. If not, figure out what you can do. So that's one thing.
And
That's
it
a
is
big thing.
it's a very easy thing to do in most states. It's electronic. You can just go on your Department of Elections, and if you're doing an early vote or an absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot, they have to, it shows you when it was received and when it was counted.
Right.
So, there is a lot of technology that's out here to support this electoral process, but there are a lot of individuals that are fighting to stop it. So we just have to make sure that we keep it accessible and fair and open. That
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
what we need to be fighting for to protect our democracy. We need to protect people's right to vote.
Yeah, check on your ballot like you're going to check. Everybody's checking on this $1.2 billion that's there, right?
Oh
We
yeah,
kind of check that all the time and look at that. This
right.
is just as important as
Yep,
that $1.2 billion.
sure is.
So
I'll
make
give you
sure.
some when I win tonight.
Okay, all of you all have it, right? Everybody right here has it if I win tonight. What I do want to say in wrapping up, I want to thank you because every time we get on these things and we say it's an hour and a half, we're like, how are we going to fill up an hour and a half? And then before we know it, the hour and a half is gone. This Facebook Live will be up and you were able to look at it over and over again. And as Senator Pinkney said, and Marla says, you can show it to people. That can be something you can do. Have your class watch it, analyze it, have your friends watch it. We didn't get into what candidate to vote for. We got into the polls. Don't let the polls get you down. That's exactly what it is. It's like a fishing pole. You don't know what you're pulling up. Don't let it get down because polling has become such a mess over the last 2.5 years. What we do know is that this is going to be a turnout election. And in some states, we already have exceeded the numbers as we have for the presidential election, which is great. So Americans are invested. We can't say they're not invested when we're seeing all these numbers skyrocket. But it's important that you make sure that people understand the issue and the candidates and they vote for the candidate, not for what's being said on these TV. They go and they do the thing that your civic duty, my dad used to say. It's your civic duty to really kind of say, he would always say to us, who are you going to vote for? We would tell him. And then his next question is why? Why are you voting for them? And we were like, oh, even if it was in the party that he was supporting, he was like, well, why are you voting for them? And then we would have to, as children, come in our own civics with your family. This is where civic starts with the family. Really say, well, I'm voting because they're behind such and such and such and such.
Mhm.
That's what Tuesday's all about. So as social workers, we're leaders.
Yes.
We've always been leaders. We've always been change agents. We've always been advocates. We've always upheld that everyone has the right to be the best that they can be. And that's what we're all about. And so I asked you as social workers to do your commitment in that code of ethics and making sure, and I know that some of these conversations are hard with your family or your kids or whatever, but have the conversation. Families have hard conversations and then they go off and eat cake or something later on. But this is the time for us because the impact of this election it's not just for my generation, it's for the next 10 years. Remember, a senator is elected for 6 years.
Mhm.
That's a long time. And so this is important. Every election is important. Next year's election is going to be important. And the next year, just don't hop over the years and think it's just the presidential or just the midterm because the school directors are going to decide what your kids are learning, what books are being removed, because in our country right now, books are being removed from the library. All questioning of people's own identity. That has an impact. Our kids are learning how to be open and honest and transparent with each other. Yet there are those in this country who are saying, nah, you follow my religion. If my religion says you can have an abortion, you have one. If you've been raped, so what? Because they're not answering these questions. And many people will say, oh, yeah, we're going to make sure they have the dollars to take care of their children. Have you seen the dollars take care of children? Have you been to hospitals where parents have had to have kids and medically because they knew um, there's no one to help them out? Everybody has the right in America to be the citizen they choose to be, as long as they live within the confines of the law. That's what America's all about. Church and state was never meant to be compromised. Those are my closing words. I pass the torch to you, Marla.
Well, I just want to say, that I want people to feel comfortable talking about politics and being engaged in politics. That we need to demystify this thing as being something that is hard or even negative. It is necessary that we're involved, and that our code of ethics, it speaks to social justice and the dignity and worth of a person, and you know our role in society. And so I just hope that everybody understands that, you know, beyond this election, you have to stay engaged, and that we have to support people in office that are doing the right thing. But it is your responsibility as a social worker to make sure that politics is not something that you just choose to be a part of every now and then, but it should be a part of your daily life. So be informed, be engaged, and be involved. And that's all I have to say. But Senator Pinkney, take it away. And let me just say thank you so much
Thank you.
for doing this at such a late stage. We just asked her, what, 20, it wasn't even 24
One
hours.
even 24 hours ago. So
She jumped on. But see, that's how social workers roll.
that's
So
what legislators do.
Thank you both for an amazing conversation. I would do it again for another hour and a half. I enjoyed this conversation. It was thoughtful, it was thought provoking. So thank you both for the careers and the legacy that you and the impact that your careers have made on social work. But I think most importantly, thank you to such an engaged audience. There were so many questions, and I hope that we were able to get to all of them. But they were so engaged and so thoughtful in the questions that were asked and that were raised. And so, thank you to all of you for spending an hour and a half with us on a Wednesday evening. Um,
Yeah.
I think the parting word that I would leave us with is that social workers are powerful. As Marla said, social work is, or politics is social work with power. We are powerful. We have the skill set, we have the knowledge, we have the resources to be impactful wherever we so desire. But as important and incredibly important is politics, is policy, is legislation. Again, the reason that I knew that I would be a good legislator is because I was a good social worker. It was because the social work programs that I came from prepared me for this, and because the things that we experience in our profession are everyday kitchen table problems, which is what politics and policy and legislation is. And so there is, as intimidating as this world and this work may seem, you are more prepared than anyone to be impactful in policy and in politics, whether that is on a campaign side helping someone get elected or whether you are the one getting elected. You have all of the skill sets that you need as a social worker.
And so, with that, we're going to say good evening. Our next one will focus on after the election. Now we know who we have. What are we going to do? Okay. Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening. And go Phillies.
And Eagles.